Our next speaker is Brian Cox. He's the Chief Executive of the Bioenergy Association, whose members are involved in research, development and production of advanced alternative fuels that a working refinery could blend with current fuel production. Brian is joining us by video link from New Plymouth.
Okay, so thanks very much for inviting me, Chris, to outline the bioenergy options that we could be using and doing at the refinery. It's an area that there's a great lot of effort needing to be put into, and it's a shame that if the refinery not being operating, it makes another barrier for us to move forward. Okay, so in terms of the Bioenergy Association, we're a sector group. We're working representing members who are researchers, investors, and fuel suppliers, and we cover the liquid, solid and gaseous biofuels. So we cover wood fuel, which is used for combustion, the gas, biogas from organic waste, and we cover liquid biofuels, which is what you need a refinery for. So, talking only about the liquid biofuels in terms of the situation we've got in New Zealand is we've got the petrol, diesel, which we do have some options for in terms of electric, but they are constrained. There are issues on that. When we come to aviation and some of the heavy fuel oils, then it becomes much more harder. But this shows the aspect of what we have to address. When we look at this from a renewables point of view, you can see that transport is the big elephant in the room. And so as a community and as an economy, we should be focusing on this. Lots of work is being done in these other areas, but in the transport area, the only thing that has been looked at really is being electricity. There's some research being done on hydrogen, but that's completely unproven at the moment. So the avenue is that the only proven one that we've got, which is government supported, is renewable, is the electricity. What are we talking about in terms of transport biofuels? Is that we have biodiesel and ethanol. Those have been in New Zealand, available in New Zealand in the past. Biodiesel is not actually the same as mineral diesel. It is similar, but not the same. Whereas when we've got advanced biofuels, then they are exactly the same as the mineral diesels. So the avenue is that we are focusing on advanced liquid biofuels, not the conventional first generation machines. Now, Z Energy have a plant which is decommissioned in Auckland, which they built and have never commercially operated. The other option is biogas, which internationally is used as a fuel, but we don't use that in New Zealand, and that comes from landfill gas or wastewater treatment. So the focus of what we are really talking about is a liquid biofuel, which is exactly the same as the existing fuels, whether it be a petrol or diesel. We generally refer to this as a renewable diesel. It's available, not commercially in New Zealand, but there are players who are making it around the world who can make it here for us. So I'm going to talk only just about the advanced biofuels, not diesel. So the issue is why biofuels for transport is that we are focusing on the heavy difficult to electrify heavy transport. Now this is land transport, marine, rail, aviation. So we're not really focusing on domestic cars, the light vehicle, the electric solution in that works quite well in most situations. But where we're talking about heavy trucks, the rails, or marine, then that's where we need to be looking at the biofuels. So they are a niche part of the market. They are not to replace the whole market. They're just part of it, part of that suite. And we're talking about a drop-in fuel. And this avoids the need to replace existing engines. So if I move to an electric car, I have to sell my old car and I have to buy a whole new car. Same would happen if you had hydrogen. So the issue with a drop-in biofuel is that you don't have to do that. Is that, in fact, you don't even notice. Is that you go to the service station, you fill up as normal, you don't know that what you would be taking is actually a renewable diesel as opposed to a mineral diesel. So the avenue is your vehicle engine doesn't know the difference, the infrastructure is exactly the same, it's all the same. So this is a huge capital benefit to vehicle owners, to the distributors and to the general market. This has generally not been recognised significantly as a huge advantage. You know, the big push for electric comes from the electricity companies because they can sell more electricity. But the avenue is that in the biofuels area, we don't have large corporates who have this product ready to be made. So the avenue it's way behind the eight ball on this. One of the issues about the aspect of having our own renewable fuels is that fuel security, and we've seen that with the world situation at the moment of oil. So we can avoid our dependence on international markets. Is that we can also focus on the match with electricity. You know, as electric cars and heat and everything goes to electric, then we are going to need a lot more power stations to make more electricity. Now we can have wind farms, offshore or domestic, we can do more geothermal, we've got more solar. But all of those do have a constraint, but the biggest aspect is that the cheapest ones are already done. So having a multi-fuel transport strategy is critical for us, so as we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. We can import. I can have a shipload of renewable diesel into New Zealand within a matter of weeks, not years. We have companies who are making renewable diesels who would love to sell it in New Zealand. So it's not difficult, it's in demand, there's not a lot of it, but it's available. But the avenue is then we can move to making our own. So the domestic production, which is what creates jobs, creates use of our renewable natural resources. So it's good for farmers, it's good for the waste area, it's good for employment of people who can, say, in the petroleum sector at the moment, can repurpose into a biofuel sector. So some of these technologies are already in New Zealand, but the government doesn't recognise them. Is that in Christchurch there is a technology there which has been making a bio-crude oil for a number of years, but hasn't managed to get the traction because it doesn't get the big push that has occurred in, say, hydrogen or electric. So the avenue is that because of lack of interest from government and not having the large corporates who have a commercial advantage to do it. I mean, solar on roofs is sold by the manufacturers of solar panels. And the same goes for hydrogen. It's being produced by the technology developers. So the avenue in the biofuels area, we don't have that at the moment. But it creates the local employment and it also is the transition to a circular economy. We have a lot of biomass. We have biomass which we waste. And you can see on my photo here that the avenue is that those residues are actually valuable. They are not rubbish. And they are the feedstocks that we can use. Same goes for organic waste, is that we can take our organics and take them from a landfill, use them to make a biogas which can be used either directly as a fuel or can be a feedstock for making other fuels. So the issue in terms of here is that we have a sector which doesn't have a lot of big corporate players who can see a lot of benefits, a lot of income for themselves, so they're not focused. So as in many markets is that it requires an assistance to get it started, and we're in that situation at the moment, is that leaving it to the market will just mean that it took years and years and years to do. But doing it now means that we can get the emissions reduction benefits within weeks, not years. We can create new employment within weeks, not years. So it's a complex market, and that's where, unlike say putting solar heated solar panels on your roof, is that you go and buy a panel, you put it on your roof, and you have an electrician who can connect it, and if you've got a surplus, you sell it to your local retailer. Now, that's pretty simple. In the biomass sector, it is more complex because the biomass comes from a lot of sources. It's got to be treated along the way. There's got a lot of transport. You've got a whole range of different things. So that complexity means that that's where government assistance can help improve the development of the market. In the aviation area, Sustainable Aviation Alliance, which has been formed and is working with government to try and make some progress in this area, but nothing's happening in the marine area and nothing's happening in the land transport area. Is that we need to be focusing on bringing these things together. We have offshore investors who are willing to come to New Zealand and deliver or to provide. We need to be focusing on those. So the public investment in research is another area which does need some assistance. Some of the technologies are only emerging, or those that have emerged need assistance to get them from pilot studies to a commercial framework and be able to deliver onto the market. So there's a number of areas in this research where we do need work. We also need, though, from all of these, and most importantly, as a refining capability, is that most of the biotechnologies that are available, they produce a biocrude, and the biocrude needs to be refined to meet fuel specifications. So if we don't have a refinery, which now we don't, we have to build one again. That is a major cost, which it's very unfortunate, and it's a shame that the government has let this go to this stage. But the avenue is that we're going to still need to build another one. Now that's just a cost which is completely unnecessary. We could have used the existing one. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Brian. Our next speaker is Chris Leitch, who is the leader of the Social Credit Party, which gathered 18,300 signatures on a petition to Parliament to try to stop the closure, and has led the political action to highlight the risk to the country's fuel security that relying on imported refined fuel poses. Chris doesn't have a voice that's working today, so his address will be given by Jason Jobsis. Jason has been a candidate for social credit on several occasions and is currently working on a process turning plastic into building material. Welcome, Jason.
Gotta love this microphone. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's really good to see so many people here. It gives me a lot of hope for the future of New Zealand. So, the decision to close the Marsden Point Oil Refinery is nothing more nor less than one driven by profit. It has nothing to do with the age of it, the condition of it, or its capabilities. Many people believe it's old and out of date. That's not the case. While its true maintenance has been less than it should have been since the decision was made offshore by the oil companies that it should be closed, it is in the top third of refineries internationally. The refinery's website boasted this until a few months ago, quote, "We are a critical link in New Zealand's energy infrastructure and a major economic and social contributor to Northland. Refining New Zealand has a reputation as one of Asia It's better than the two refineries Australia has decided to keep operational with subsidies to ensure it has fuel security. Some of that subsidy money is underpinning upgrades to those two refineries. It has little to do with whether it was profitable. Sure, COVID had affected many years of good profits, but a report the company commissioned from advisors Grant Samuels predicted it would return to good profits again by 2024. The world is opening up and the company's profits were already surpassing those predictions this year, 2 years early. EVs, electric vehicles, are becoming more popular and the government has set carbon reduction targets, but the likelihood of us not needing oil-based fuels for more years is slim. New fuel technologies at scale are a long way off yet, especially for vehicles other than cars, and the refinery could play a key role in those. So why was it closed down? Why didn't the company apply to the government for a fuel subsidy like Australia's refineries did? I believe that the current CEO, Naomi James, was sent here in April 2020 with the sole task of closing it down, and that she will be off to a new position, likely with a big bonus, once the new imported fuel regime is bedded down. We'll see if I'm right. I have no problem with profit-driven decisions. They're necessary for companies to return value to shareholders. But there are other considerations, particularly in this case. And overseas entities are generally brutal in seeking maximum profits and cutting their losses. They have no loyalty to any country. German multimedia company Boa Media, for example, it brought up a whole lot of top magazine titles, the New Zealand's Women's Weekly, The Listener, North and South, and a lot more. It made a sudden exit from New Zealand in early 2020, saying the business was no longer available. Code for we're not making enough profit. Over 600 people lost their jobs. Australia's Nine Entertainment did a similar thing, selling its New Zealand newspaper and radio subsidiary stuff to local management. The New Zealand refining company, now renamed Channel Infrastructure, is not doing either. It's consolidating its profits by locking us into a deal where we can never get out of. New Zealand's fuel supply is not something like magazines or newspapers that we have any choice over. It underpins our whole economy. Without a secure fuel supply, our agriculture machinery can't operate. Trucks can't get our biggest overseas earner off the farms and to our processors for export. The transport fleet that puts food on the shelves of our supermarkets and goods on every shop shelf won't be able to do that. Our emergency services, ambulance, fire, rescue helicopters, and Army, Navy and Air Force search and rescue and disaster relief will be paralysed. Construction will come to a halt. Inter-island and Pacific shipping will stop. There's much more.
Good. Sooner the better.
The oil companies, the major shareholders, have tightened their control on our economy and ensured we can't do without them, and in the process generated themselves an income stream that will produce increased profits for years to come. Any chance of self-reliance has been stripped away. How could we be so stupid? The supply chain issues currently being experienced worldwide that are seeing shortages in almost everything we buy should have rung alarm bells. A paper presented to Cabinet in November 2021 by Energy Minister Megan Woods states this, and I quote, "There does not appear to be a clear case for maintaining refinery operations for fuel resilience reasons except to address an exceptional no fuel imports scenario. This is an unlikely scenario, but not entirely implausible. Therefore, I believe the option of maintaining refinery capacity warrants an active decision by government. Amongst its recommendations was this: closure of the refinery is expected to have little impact on fuel supply resilience under most disruption scenarios, but it could reduce New Zealand's resilience to a low likelihood but high consequence event that leaves New Zealand with no ability to import fuels. Just 5 months later, that high consequence event that leaves New Zealand with no ability to import fuels and an exceptional no fuel import scenario may just have arrived with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It has certainly affected the price. And what about the possibility of another conflict? China has been claiming vast areas as its own and has built a military base on islands it reclaimed from the ocean off the coast of the Philippines. It's just signed an agreement with the Solomon Islands and continues to claim it is going to take Taiwan back under mainland Chinese government. Are we prepared for a China-United States-Australia conflict? While the shipping routes from the Asian refineries the company is sourcing its refined fuel from be cut off and the supply of fuel to our essential services severely compromised. Who knows? But shouldn't we be prepared for that exceptional no fuel import scenario by at least keeping the refinery operational? The oil companies have said, no problem, we can guarantee supply security. But where's the proof? Where's the precedent we can rely on? According to the National Fuel Plan, New Zealand is supposed to hold 90 days of fuel demand in stock. In reality, it holds only 2/3 of that, 60 days. Take note, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has been going on for 59 days. The other third is held in tickets, promises from other countries to release some of their fuel stocks to us if we are in need. The cost of that amounts to more than $13 million per year. But what happens if those countries are also affected by the disruption? Will they release those stocks? What do you think? And what about if the shipping lanes are disrupted? Those stocks wouldn't be able to get to us anyway. So where does that leave us? At least with the refinery operational, we could refine our own Taranaki oil, albeit less efficiently than normal crude. Our oil could be able to keep the refinery running at around 1/3 of its capacity and be able to keep essential services running should a crisis eventuate. The refinery already used some of that Taranaki oil in its operation. The Cabinet paper acknowledged that, quote, having a domestic refinery could potentially enable the refining of at least some fuels from crude oil produced within New Zealand, together with any imported crude oil that is available, unquote. Yet for the sake of around $400 million to buy the shares in the refining company, the Cabinet decided not to provide the country with an insurance policy, but to rely on the promises of the oil companies. I believe that's one of the most short-sighted decisions government has made, and there are many. Some might say that $400 million would be better spent building state houses, helping reduce poverty, or providing more resources for our hospitals that we've already taxed too much. Of course, they're right, but the $400 million could have been found without costing taxpayers a single cent. If you're not already aware, the government-owned Reserve Bank has created around $55 billion. That's $55,000 million in the last 2 years, and it hasn't cost the taxpayer anything. Another 400 million would be a drop in the bucket, especially to secure our fuel supply. Is it too late?
No. No.
Well, nearly, but not quite. That's why the company is proceeding with indecent haste to destroy the refinery infrastructure and is heavying staff to try to ensure that information doesn't get out. In its advice booklet to shareholders before the vote to close the operation, it said this: Refining New Zealand is planning a safe and efficient shutdown of the refinery and a subsequent decommissioning of redundant assets which are not suitable for repurposing.
Oh, bullshit.
This includes the de-inventorying, de-energising and isolation of these assets to leave them in a safe condition for future demolition or other uses. These assets include the refinery, processing plants, surplus tanks, piping and other equipment not required for terminal operation. Are the stories about concrete being poured into pipes, holes being cut into them, and electrical circuits being cut true?
Nope, not yet.
I don't know. But why would those stories be doing the rounds? That's not securing those assets for future demolition of other users.
Still steam coming out of the plant.
And why are staff being headied with one former worker being sacked from his new refinery job in Australia just days after being quoted in a Northern Advocate article? If you wanted to ensure the refinery never gets used again, those are the sort of actions you would take. Remember, I said earlier, overseas entities are generally brutal in seeking maximum profits and cutting their losses. They have no loyalty to any country. Apart from the need to have an insurance policy to ensure the country has fuel security, there are other reasons to keep the refinery operational. You will have heard Brian Cox talking about biofuels and the refinery blending those. But additionally, Marsden Point could become the centre of a new technology development. Currently, the biggest waste company in New Zealand, Chinese-owned Waste Management, is looking to develop an enormous new tip site in the pristine Dome Valley, just south of Wellsford, to put Auckland's rubbish into.
That's close to here.
Any leakages from that site will flow into the Kaipara Harbour, one of our main fish breeding areas. An Environment Court challenge led by the Save the Dome group is underway. Why are we looking to dig another big hole in the ground to tip rubbish into? That's third world stuff. Advanced countries view rubbish as a valuable resource and are building waste-to-energy plants. There are over 2,000 of them around the world. A waste-to-energy plant at Marsden Point could produce enough power to run the refinery and power and heat to run other new technology developments. It could take rubbish from around the country and the Pacific, which has a major rubbish problem, by rail and ship, divert plastic to a new plastic-to-fuel plant to build materials, production, and a plastic reforming plant. If you take a look at the slides here for a minute, these are some of the potential options.
We never will, same as we
Yeah, as long as we have oil, we will have plastic. Is that all the slides? Yeah. The site could accommodate a plant using carbon capture technology, turning carbon dioxide from the air into fuel. Complementary technologies like a wastewater treatment plant and a desalination plant to provide fresh water could go hand in hand with those other forward-thinking ideas. They are all operating overseas. Without an operating refinery, many of those new technologies become less viable. Why weren't those possibilities part of Cabinet's consideration? They should have been. So what we in Social Credit, the other guest speakers, the 18,300 people who signed the petition, and I think all of you want, is for Cabinet to urgently reconsider before it is really too late and move to protect the refinery, the country's fuel security, and those potential new technological developments that would be great for our economy and our environment. The refinery is not Channel Infrastructure's or the government's to destroy. It's been paid for by the taxes of decades of Kiwis and by fuel users. It belongs to us. It should be retained in working conditions. Thank you all again for coming. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jason.